Welcome to the Health Science Podcast, sponsored by the National Health Association. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, and today my very special guest is Dr. Kerry Graff, medical physician, board certified in lifestyle medicine and family practice. Kerry's been practicing for a very long time. She's a member and part of the Love.Life Telehealth service, which we're going to talk a lot about her practice in that. She has won some notable prizes. One is the James Ferrante Prize for Family Medicine, and the other is the Jeffrey Allen Gray Memorial Prize for Compassion in Medicine. Welcome, Dr. Graff. It's a pleasure to meet you. Welcome to the Health Science Podcast, brought to you by the National Health Association, the oldest organization in the world championing the extraordinary benefits of a whole plant food diet and healthy lifestyle, as well as water-only fasting. We believe that health results from healthful living and focus on evidence-based science that promotes the health of you and your loved ones, as well as the health of all animals and the environment. We feature experts from a cross-section of disciplines within the plant nutrition, vegan, psychological, environmental, and animal compassion sectors. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, the NHA's Director of Health Education.
Thank you, Dr. Sabatino. It's a pleasure to be here.
You know, I noticed in looking at your history that, you've practiced for quite a while, almost 26 years plus. And you made the point that the first half of that time, you were actually operating pretty much as a disease manager, as unfortunately many physicians do, just trying to manage health issues with typical forms of medication and treatment, not understanding the power of prevention and reversibility on some of these major issues. So talk about, through that time, what were the aha moments in your journey that moved you from that place to where you eventually got to?
I really had two major aha moments. One of them didn't have anything to do with lifestyle medicine, which is what I do now. But I had been caring for a patient who, she was elderly. She lived with her adult son who had an issue with alcohol. And she came into my office extremely anxious and depressed, and was sent there basically by a counselor whom she was seeing. And the counselor had actually given me a heads up the day before that she was going to come in, and she let me know what was going on with this patient, which was that the son worked very part-time. Any money that he made, he spent on alcohol. And basically his mom, the patient, was kind of footing all the bills for everything, and he was taking advantage of her financially. But he also, sometimes when he would get drunk, he would physically assault her. And things had gotten really bad, and they had called a family meeting to get him kicked out of the house, which hadn't happened yet when I saw this patient. And she was, of course, just a hot mess over all of this. And she was extremely anxious, and she was really depressed. And she definitely needed some medication to help her get through this really traumatic event in her life. And I started her on a medication that would kick in immediately to help for the anxiety, and also something that would last, that would take a few weeks to kick in, but then would be able to be used kind of more longer than the short acting stuff, which you really don't want to use for very long at all because it's addictive. And she got through getting the son kicked out of the house, and the family was all supporting her. And I scheduled a follow-up visit for her for a couple of weeks later to check in to see how she was doing. And she looked like a new woman. She was so much more relaxed, and she was so happy. And what she did was that she thanked me profusely, because now that I had treated her anxiety and depression problem, she could let her son back in. And it was one of those just awful moments when you realize that, a lot of what we are experiencing mentally and physically with our health is really due to the situation that we're in. And if we fix that, then we don't need the meds. And what we're really doing is we're often just covering up the symptoms of things, right? We're covering up this depression and anxiety, but allowing patients to continue with the behaviors that are getting them into trouble in the first place. So that was kind of like my first aha moment with, you really got to be careful that you're not just enabling people's
right
behaviors that are not healthy. Then the second aha moment, personal one for me, I had developed all kinds of medical issues. I had hypothyroidism and depression, and I was overweight, and I had chronic abdominal pain due to endometriosis. I had some infertility problems as well, chronic constipation, reflux, pretty much all kinds of stuff. And I was pre-diabetic, and I had had a couple of blood sugars because I was checking myself at home that were very, very close to the diabetic level. And my kids had actually shamed me into feeling like I was a bad mom if I didn't get them Netflix. It was about 10 years ago. And I decided I would watch Forks Over Knives. And I watched it and I was like, holy heck. If what they're saying is true, then I have been doing everything wrong my entire career in medicine, and I should be addressing what people are eating and their physical activity, and I should be relying a lot less on medications and procedures. So, but I wasn't sure they weren't quacks when I watched the movie. So basically I did two things. One was I spent the next 3 months just devouring everything I could read to look at what the data was on this. And the other thing was that I did an N of one, a study with one person, which was me. I stuck myself on this whole food plant-based diet they were talking about on the low-fat version of it to see what would happen. And basically, I got so much better so quickly that it was just like unbelievable. So I kind of joke that over that 3 months, I pretty much reversed all my medical issues except for my seasonal allergies are still there. That didn't make those go away. And it was so obvious that I felt so much better because I'd lost 25 pounds and now I had all this energy. And there's nothing better than losing 25 pounds without being hungry. That's like such a win.
That's amazing. Of course. Yes.
It feels great. But it was noticeable. So my patients kind of all started asking, Doc, you look great. What are you doing? And so I joke that I started talking about whole food plant-based diets and kind of just never shut up. And that is not far from the truth. So that really was a big moment for me.
Well, that's a big step because, the way you practice, there had to be a discipline of unlearning in a certain way to embrace this new way of thinking and acting and so on. So I'm assuming at that point, that juncture point, you were kind of moving in a certain direction, but you still had patients that were locked into medication programs and so on. I'm sure that was not a totally smooth transition at that point. You had to make certain steps. So how was that whole overall transition for you?
Well, it just became something I started talking to patients about. What I would do initially was just kind of refer patients to watching Forks Over Knives. And then they would come back and they say, yeah, but I'm already eating a healthy diet. And then what you'd find out is that, they're eating one serving of vegetables a day and one serving of fruit a day and maybe some whole wheat bread, but that's it for, all the rest of their calories are either
Right.
processed things or animal-based foods. So I was looking then for something that I could use that would actually give patients a gauge of what percentage of their calories are really coming from whole plants, right? Because we know that that the percentage of whole plants and all of the diseases that we experience here in the US, pretty much they all have this, negative linear relationship where the more whole plants you eat as a percentage of your calories, the less you have of heart disease, of diabetes, of cancer, of autoimmune diseases. So I really wanted to be able to gauge that. And we know that the longest living people on earth are getting 80% or more of their calories from whole plants, and the average American is getting somewhere around 10.
Right.
So these people who thought they were doing well, when we actually looked at it, they were getting about 20% of their calories from whole plants, which is better than 10, but it's not great. It's not like the 80%. So I stumbled on to the only thing that I could find back then, this was in 2013 going into 2014, was the 4-leaf survey. So that is a 12-question survey. It takes about 2 minutes. It's for free online. If you wanted to do it, it's the number 4leafsurvey.com. It's the only thing that I could find that would give kind of like a percentage of calories from whole plants. And I really loved it because it was simple and easy to use. So the person who originated that survey was Jim Hicks. He goes by J. Morris Hicks. And so I wrote to him and I asked him for permission if I could use it with my patients. And he had kind of already moved on from looking at whole food plant-based diets from a human health standpoint to really looking at the environmental climate change impact of eating plant-based diets. but he was happy to let me use it, with the caveat that I needed to report back to him how things were going. And so my office kind of became the beta test site for the 4-leaf survey because nobody was really using it prior to that. And I found it incredibly helpful because it really got patients out of that. I think that thinking that they're doing well when they're really not, and telling them how much they needed to change. And it's also really nice because it does really kind of bring up that linear effect, which is, it's not all or nothing. You don't have to have a perfect diet, but the more you do, the better you get. So do as much as you're willing and able.
Right.
So I started using that with patients, and then I was giving Jim some feedback about various patients and how they were doing. And he's like, we should write a book. So we ended up writing a book together. It's the 4-Leaf Guide to Vibrant Health. And he wrote the chapters that were about whole food plant-based diets on environmental health. And I wrote the chapters that were specific to human health.
Fantastic. I'm here with Dr. Kerry Graff. We're going to take just a few moments to have a little break and hear from our sponsor, the National Health Association, and we'll be right back. You're listening to the NHA Health Science Podcast. Dr. Frank Sabatino here. Are you ready for an extraordinary adventure that combines relaxation, exploration, and vibrant health? Then set your sails for the NHA plant-exclusive cruises. Imagine cruising through exotic destinations, savoring delectable plant-based cuisine, and engaging in rejuvenating activities, all while surrounded by like-minded individuals passionate about health and wellness. These cruises offer more than just a vacation. They offer an opportunity to immerse yourself in the NHA's principles of healthy living. And they rank incredibly high on the ratings of eco-friendly cruise lines. We all know how important our oceans are, and our cruise partner, Windstar, is fully committed to this. Join us aboard our upcoming plant-exclusive cruises and experience the synergy of health and leisure. Delight in gourmet SOS-free meals prepared by talented chefs. Attend informative workshops and enjoy the serenity of the sea, all tailored to nourish your body, mind, and spirit. For more details and to reserve your spot on our next adventure, visit healthscience.org and click the link under Travel. Don't miss this chance to indulge in a wellness retreat like no other. Elevate your well-being and make memories that will last a lifetime. And remember, your feedback matters. Please take a moment to leave a rating and a review wherever you're listening to the NHA Health Science Podcast. I'm Dr. Frank Sabatino, your host. Now, back to the show. Welcome back to the Health Science Podcast. I'm here with my special guest, Dr. Kerry Graff, who's part of Love.Life Telehealth. And we're talking about her evolution into really adopting and utilizing plant-based nutrition in her practice and helping people recover from very serious health issues. And I noticed that through that time, from 2014 on, you were embracing more and more of that. And I noticed that you were one of the first of several hundred people that were board certified in lifestyle medicine in 2017, which is really quite an accomplishment at that point. And that must have been a really interesting and happy development for you during that window of time leading up to that. Talk a little bit about that.
I was so excited to find out we have this whole specialty of lifestyle medicine. Who knew? I had not heard about it. I didn't know about it. And like, it's like, I've got a whole group of people who like get it, that know about this stuff. But there weren't very many of us when we started. So it was really kind of cool the first year to be one of the first. It was one of 204 on the whole planet that were board certified in lifestyle medicine. Now there are thousands of us, so we're not so special anymore.
So, yeah, well, I understand that. But even so, the fact that there is that movement in medicine is profound enough when you think about what that kind of movement has to overcome in the inertia of typical medical education and practice. So that's really quite profound, really, when you think about it.
It's exciting.
Again, I'm sorry.
I was just saying it's exciting to see how much growth it's had over the time.
God, absolutely. So let's talk about your segue from all of that into embracing something like Love.Life Telehealth and why that is such an important kind of dance and movement for you. Talk a little bit more about that.
Well, when I first started incorporating this in my practice, I had a micro practice model, which means that you work at a very small office. I had one staff member. Otherwise, it was me, right? That was it. You work out of, one exam room. The nice thing about that is that I'm my own boss. So I could kind of, do whatever I wanted. I didn't have to get permission from anybody because I was just getting it from me. And it allowed me to be really versatile. So what I've kind of found as I was working with patients was, yes, they need to have the survey because that helps. And they could really use a class that kind of helps guide them through adopting a whole food plant-based diet. So then I developed that and was offering that. And then they need an ongoing support group, and it works best when it has food. So we offered that. And we kind of just grew things over time as we kind of noticed that there were things that patients needed. And I started getting so many patients, I didn't know what to do with them all. So I had a really long waiting list for primary care, which is what I was really doing this under. But then I had other patients that had other primary care dogs, and they really just wanted to see, they were happy with them, the primary care dogs otherwise, but they wanted to see me for the lifestyle medicine component. So I created a consult service. So I had a group of patients that I saw for everything, and then a group of patients that I just saw for lifestyle medicine consultations. And then I was running that, and then even that started having this huge waiting list. And what I realized was that we needed an army of people to do this work because we've got just a massive amount of chronic disease. And so I approached Rochester Regional Health, which is a big health organization in my area, and told them, what I was doing, and what I was thinking was we could help other physicians get certified in board certified in lifestyle medicine, and they were all in, and it was great. And so I worked to incorporate that and to grow that into the system for a couple of years. And then we had an administration change, and we had some financial issues with the health system, and pretty much the program was really undermined. So that was when I decided that I was going to leave, and then was really kind of trying to figure out where I wanted to go. And although I really love doing primary care, and I had patients that I'd taken care of for 26 years, my passion was really with working with the folks who were really ready to make lifestyle change and really needed guided through that process. So I decided when I left working for Rochester Regional that I was going to work just doing lifestyle medicine, and I joined Love.Life Telehealth. So I'm their most recent addition for their physicians. I just see patients in New York. The nice thing about Love.Life Telehealth is that they've got physicians across the country. So pretty much wherever you are, you can see one of their board certified lifestyle medicine physicians, and they're all fabulous. They're just the nicest people, and they're just brilliant doctors. Plus, if you've got a really challenging case, we all get together and talk about it. So you get to pick everybody's brains, which is really nice.
Yeah, as we talk about that, let people know that that web address if you can, because we're showing it in the show notes. So let them know where you are and how they can find you.
Yeah, so the platform that I'm working through for consults is Love.Life Telehealth. My personal website is kerrygraffmd.com.
So talk about the rewarding nature of the telehealth service, because it's a whole different model. And I know when people submit information, you're getting a really full history up front, so that before you do your consults, you've got a lot of information that's gathered. So talk about how that feels and works for you, just on an emotional and professional level.
I love it because people don't come until they're actually ready to make a change. They just need some guidance on how to do it. So in primary care, it was really wonderful when people were excited about wanting to make lifestyle change, but a lot of people you'll work with for 10 years and they're still not ready.
Right.
And some people will never be ready. So you're getting people that are really excited about making the change and just need guidance, which is lots of fun. But you see really amazing changes when people make big changes in what they're doing with their lifestyle. You see huge improvements in their health. And lots of times we are able to get them off a lot of medications, which is fabulous when you can do it. It's the most rewarding work we do. Patients don't get really excited when you finally get their blood pressure control after the third blood pressure medication that they're on.
Right.
When you get them off their medication and they're feeling great and their numbers look great, they are the happiest people on the planet. And that's just a joy to watch.
Well, the interesting thing always, when you're doing private practice, is that the issue of compliance is always an issue, because they've got all these kinds of influences around them. The fact that they come to you, it's already kind of a captive audience. They're coming because they're ready to participate in this communication with you.
Yeah.
that is dealing with these pillars of lifestyle medicine and really starting to address this idea that, look, you have this autonomy, this ability to
Mhm.
not only prevent what's going through what you're dealing with, but even to maybe perhaps reverse this and get off of these medications and so on. So I could see the rewarding nature of that. Is there any shortcoming to the fact that it's online for you? Is there any shortcomings to that at all?
Well, there are always,
Compared to face or compared to the way you would traditionally run an office practice?
there are pros and cons, right? So I love seeing patients in person, and you do miss that. Um, it would be nice to have a small practice that's in person, that's here. But the fact that people don't have to leave work to come, right?
Right.
So I had patients that would travel 3.5 hours to see me in person, and I'm like, wow, that's really a huge commitment, and I'm glad that you really want to see me. But boy, let's do this via Zoom, or the equivalent. Um, I love the fact that Love.Life Telehealth is able to reach people. You can be really, really remote, but as long as you've got internet, you can
Right.
access somebody. Sometimes usually in lifestyle medicine, there are very few physical things that you really need to look at, and all of those things you can do via telehealth and look at them. So if you're worried somebody's got a cortisol problem, you can look for the brown patches in the armpits or the hump on the back of the neck. You can
Right.
show that in a video. So I don't think that that gets in the way of diagnosing. Like, I think it would be impossible to do a primary care telehealth only practice. Like, how do you listen to somebody's lungs, right? Unless you had special equipment that allowed you to do that, but the average person can't.
Yeah. Right.
So, um, so lifestyle medicine in general really adapts well to telehealth. I think better than probably any other specialty.
Kerry,
My
when you're dealing with the fact that, you're helping people, let's say in some instance, get off of certain medication, these medications they were put on typically by primary care physicians in their home environment. Is there any conflict that comes up with that between them working with you, them going back to
Yeah.
dealing maybe with some of the local people that they see? Do you see any conflict that comes up with that?
I try my best not to create a conflict with that unless there's an emergency situation, like somebody's extremely low, they've got diabetes, they've made some changes, their numbers are really, really low, and they haven't been able to contact their doctor. Then I'll adjust the meds down and tell them what to do. Otherwise, I'll be like, talk to your primary care doc, or I'll reach out to the primary care doc. If the patient's having trouble, or if it's somebody that I know that's easy to get a hold of. Sometimes it's harder and it's easier for the patient to get a hold. But so we try not to step on any toes, because we don't want folks to not send to us. But there are lots of times when blood pressure is too low or sugars are too low that it's just dangerous, that you really need to back off. Cholesterol is another thing that often people need less of. But I just had this come up yesterday. I'm like, okay, you probably could manage on half that dose and then recheck your cholesterol levels in a couple of weeks. But I want you to talk to your doctor before you just do that. And they'll do that. So we try to do it so that it's kind of in a way that doesn't get anybody mad at us. For autoimmune medications, those can be really tricky because a lot of times the rheumatologists think that they're better because of the medicine they were giving them, when the reality was that they were still doing lousy when they were on that med, but when they made changes in their diet, they got a lot better.
Well,
Um,
I want to get into that with you, but let me touch on something else. You have in your philosophy, as I read it, you make the point of the importance of food and whole plant food as being a major pillar for the
yeah,
practice and the recovery that people can have. But you're also very aware and very instrumental in bringing the other pieces and pillars of lifestyle medicine into play, like stress management, sleep, and components of that nature.
yeah.
How do you work through in the telehealth system to have a kind of a collaborative effort to address those other pillars successfully? Talk a little bit about how that gets integrated in the kind of practice that you run.
Sure. So when I'm doing an initial consult visit with any patient, in that first visit, we try to address all 6 of the lifestyle pieces. So the easy way to think about it is what you do with your fingers, your forks, and your feet. So fingers is alcohol, tobacco, and drug use. forks is what you're eating, and feet is physical activity. Those three are responsible for about 80% of all the health misery in the US, what we do or don't do with those three things, right? But the three other things have some independent effect on your health, but can completely sabotage your ability to make progress on those front three. And those are sleep, stress, and love, which means good relationships, but also having passion and for something in your life or meaning in your life, something that gives your life meaning and purpose. And usually I'll explain that to patients, and then I'll say, okay, so let's start with love. What is it that you want to be alive and healthy to be able to do or to be around for? And you make sure that they've got positive motivators, because every once in a while somebody will get referred to me, and they will have just had a heart attack or had a cancer diagnosis or something, and they're seeing me, but it's all out of fear. It's completely fear-based. They're scared to death of dying or something else bad happening to them. And when you poke around for, what they want to live for, they just start crying because they really don't have anything they want to live for. They're just afraid to die. And for those folks, you've got to address that first, because fear is only a good motivator for the first 2 months or so. And then by month 3, you're back to doing all the things that got you into trouble in the first place, because it's not sustainable. If you have to convince yourself to eat well and to exercise every day because you're freaking yourself out because you're going to die if you don't, you get so anxious or so depressed that life isn't worth living anyway. So might as well have that cheeseburger, or you stick your head in the sand and pretend it's not happening. So make sure people have positive motivators and help people to stay laser focused on those positive motivators. That's key number 1. And then I look at sleep and stress. So how much sleep are you getting? What's the quality of that sleep? Because if you're exhausted during the day because you're not getting adequate sleep, then you're going to fuel yourself with caffeine and sugar, or crunch up an entire bag of potato chips on your way home from work so you don't fall asleep at the wheel. And it's you're not going to be able to make progress on the diet if you're exhausted. And if your only stress management technique is to eat junk food, then you're really not going to be able to make changes on the food either. So making sure that those are in good position. I think of those as like the foundation on which the whole house is built. And I think about the food part of it, what goes in your forks, is like you're building this beautiful kitchen, but if you build it in a house on a crappy foundation, how long is that beautiful kitchen going to last? It's just not. So make sure the sleep, stress, and love are really in good shape, and then you can start working on the things that really matter on the front end. And for most people, diet is both the area where it gives the most bang because it just has such a powerful impact on our overall health. But it's also the area where people are the furthest from. Like I said, the healthiest people on the planet are getting 80% or more of their calories from whole plants. The average American is getting 10. So there's a lot of room for improvement there. So between those two, it's why food is so incredibly powerful. But I've made the mistake of focusing on the food and not focusing on the sleep, stress, and love. And it's universal. You'll get somebody who will do it for a little period of time, but it will not be sustainable. And I think about these 6 pillars as I come from a family of teachers. My parents were both English teachers. And I think about it kind of like as a GPA, right? So you don't want to go from a B to a B plus over in one area. Well, you're taking, if you do that in your diet, or even take your C diet to an A diet, but you're also moving your other ones down, and you move from a B to a D in stress and relationships, right? So you can't fix one area if it screws up anything else.
Right.
That's the concept. You can only add on to that. And what we really like to do as human beings, we all do this, is we like to do better in the area we're already doing well. We want to get from that A to an A plus before we take our D to a B. And I don't know why we do that, but it's just, you have the areas where you really are comfortable with. We see this all the time with folks that have not so great diets, but they're exercise crazy. They want to ramp up that exercise to doing a little bit more. How can I make this more perfect? While they're completely ignoring something they're not doing that great in. So,
We have those comfort zones, and that's what happens. I think we like to settle in those. So if you've had some success and you're comfortable in that zone, you only want to get that to the nth degree if you can. Well, I'm here with Dr. Kerry Graff. Kerry, again, let people know the location where they can find you if they want to pursue you, because it'll be in the show notes. Could you say that again, please?
Yeah, sure. My personal website is www.kerrygraff, KerryGraffMD.com. It's got some of the other online programs and things that I run, as well as the link to do telehealth through Love.Life Telehealth, which is where I see patients. And again, I only see patients in New York, but Love.Life Telehealth has physicians across the country.
Kerry, do you actually teach people stress response management techniques
Mhm.
online? Do you share those with people that way? Yeah.
Yep, a bunch of different things depending on kind of where the person is, and what they like. Maybe something as simple as, so you have somebody who will not like sit and do any kind of meditation, but they've got a dog. Okay. Every time you take your dog out for a walk, every time your dog stops to sniff something, which is, constantly, look around. What catches your eye that makes your heart feel happy? And then you just watch that until your dog's ready to go again. That's stress reduction. That's meditation in a different
Right.
way. So you try to work with where people are. If somebody is a musician, they already know it. You go into that zone, right? You playing that piece of music as beautifully as you possibly can. That's the zone where everything else falls away and you're in that moment. Incredibly stress relieving.
Well, I like,
So
yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you try to find out what it is that resonates with people, and use that, right, rather than trying to force something very specific that you like on somebody else, because that rarely works. For some folks, prayer is a huge part of their stress management, and then you just sink into that. You can get them to do more of what they do already that works for them.
I like your approach to reaching people where they're at. I like that quote that I read online where you say, just adapt as much of the diet as you can without making yourself and everyone around you nuts, because nuts is not sustainable over time,
Yeah.
which is actually very true, because so often we can turn somebody off because we're trying to teach them where we want them to be rather than where they are. And they may actually turn off to a path that could really remarkably change their lives in a positive way. So I think that's a very powerful viewpoint and approach.
Most people do this all in stages, right? You'll do a little bit, you realize, okay, that feels comfortable. I could do that kind of ongoing. Oh, I could add this little thing in, or I could add this in, or I could do this instead. Most of us get to a healthier place in our lives by doing things in stages, and there will be times in your life when you can do more, and there are times when you can do less. Just do the best you can in whatever the circumstances that you happen to be in.
I noticed that when you're working with a lot of the things that we work with, obesity, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, and so on. But I got that fact that one of your interests and passions was dealing with autoimmune gut conditions. And as you mentioned, the things that actually heal that, high fiber and plant foods, are often not tolerated in the early inflammatory stages of some of those things. And then you talk about the fact that you have a unique approach to kind of dancing around that. Can you share that with the audience and talk a little bit of your approach in dealing with those kinds of problems?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for bringing that up. I particularly love working with patients because they're challenging, and they're like, you're always MacGyvering it, right? Like you try one thing and you'll be like, oh, I need to tweak that a little bit to make that work. So I find them more challenging, so it's fun. In working at Rochester Regional, most of the time when those patients came in, if they went to one of the other docs, they'd send them my way, kind of turf it over to me. So the biggest thing with you've got any kind of GI issue, especially if it's autoimmune and you've got inflammation, is that you're not going to be able to tolerate high fiber diets because they're going to be pushing all this roughage past all that inflamed areas. And so basically, there are two big ways that I intervene with it. One is doing really large green smoothies. So you're getting all of the anti-inflammatory properties of greens, along with some berries in there as well, which really helps to people tolerate it fine once you pulverize it like crazy in a blender. So you just blenderize that whole thing and drink it. And then that reduces some of the inflammation. The other main thing that we'll use in the early stages with these folks are completely pureed soups. So like a butternut squash soup, or a sweet potato soup, or something that basically you blenderize not blenderize, but like just puree the whole thing. I love immersion blenders. They're like super helpful. And you're just getting everything already. Your blender is going to basically be doing a bunch of the work that your gut would normally have to do, so that you don't have these big chunks of food to process until the swelling goes down, and then you slowly add back in things that you tolerate. If somebody already tolerates sweet potatoes, and a lot of these folks do, I continue that while we're doing, some of the soups
Right.
and some of the big green smoothies. But over time, their gut really settles down, and then you're able to add more and more back in, and you go with mostly cooked foods first in small pieces. So again, the GI tract doesn't have to do much. So doing something like a minestrone soup with really small pieces of things. And then you would graduate to maybe something that is steamed but well steamed. So maybe somewhat bigger pieces and a little less cooked than it would be in a soup. And then you might graduate to roasted. And then if things get really good, you might graduate to some raw stuff. But that is pushing it for a lot of folks with these issues. And so lots of times you end up not doing much of anything raw, which is also a really important reason for getting those grains into the smoothie.
Right.
Because they're not going to be able to eat it as a salad. It's just too much roughage for that gut, especially if you've got some scarring in there, like you'd have with Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. You can have some strictures in there from previous scarring that can be problematic.
Right.
So I love working with with those folks in particular.
Yeah, historically in the NHA, a lot of the physicians would utilize blended salads, smoothies, exactly as you described, but they also have a long history of doing short periods of water-only fasting under supervision, which also has a remarkable ability to just allow the bowel to calm down and that inflammation really subside. We'll see like 30, 40 CRP levels down to 3 or 4 in 2 or 3 days of fasting. So you can see that inflammation just really quieting down, and then you can incorporate a lot of the kinds of things that you've mentioned. So yeah, so I love your approach. I think it's fantastic. And again, these are such common problems in our culture because of the long history of compromised diets and food use, so that's fantastic.
I'm glad you brought up the water only fasting. It's if you're going to do it for more than 24 hours, the recommendation is that you do it under doctor supervision with
Right.
labs. And that's problematic because it basically means that you've got to be someplace where you can get that done. And there are not very many places to go, right?
Right.
So there are a few. So definitely we will use that, but a lot of times it's not feasible for people to
It's not
travel.
feasible, right?
Yeah, because we have very few places that will do that, and most of it's because of the regulations around running a place like that.
So how does Dr. Graff take care of herself? I noticed that you have a history of being a musician. You still play piano and cello.
I played the piano today earlier. I played my
Oh,
cello a
beautiful.
week ago. So I still do that. I go to a lot of small venue music live things around town. We've got a number of those. I swing dance, which is kind of a new passion of
Which
mine.
is fantastic. I think that's
So fun.
fantastic.
So fun. I spent the last 4 days cross-country skiing, and I've got the blisters to prove it. So yeah, it was my first time
That's
out for
really
the year,
funny.
and I skied a lot. So yeah, we haven't had any snow here, so I had to go up to the Adirondacks, and I got a little overzealous.
Yeah, you're up in that Finger Lake region. It's a beautiful area, beautiful part of New York State.
It is, and usually we have snow, but the last 2 winters have been really sad for skiing here. So I had to go 4 hours away to get any kind of decent snow, and even then it was a little sketchy. So I love anything on or by the water. So if we get to, when we're in the summer, I'm out kayaking or swimming, or I just love
Kerry,
anything.
do you have any significant goals on your horizon that you would like to achieve and accomplish with your work? Is there anything you're working on, books, presentations, lectures? To talk a little bit about that.
I am working on a book. It's in the very early stages. So it is actually my goal is to finish that by the end of the year. And it's really looking at kind of like a more structured way of kind of working through making lifestyle change, really highlighting the fact that we need to pay attention to the sleep, stress, and love before we work on the front end of that. And kind of putting like that little mantras that I use with patients, and I want to make sure that those are all in there too. So that's on the agenda. Certainly I want to develop more patients through Love.Life Telehealth, get that solid. I'm just reaching out to my old referral network so they know where I am now, where they can find me to send me patients. So those are the two big things on the agenda for this year.
Beautiful. So as we wind this down, do you have any final words that you'd like to share with the audience out here?
Just that it's so incredibly worth it to do everything that you can to live as healthfully as possible. Pills and procedures are not going to save you from your bad habits. Even when the medical system was at its best, which it is not right now, right? We've got a lot of burned out folks, and the system's really overwhelmed. It still does. All of those pills and procedures that I used to prescribe don't hold a candle to what a whole food plant-based diet, regular consistent exercise, regular stress management, good sleep, avoiding toxic substances can do. It doesn't even come close.
I can't thank my special guest, Dr. Kerry Graff, enough for being with us today, sharing her expertise, experience, her heart, her insight. And I urge you to follow her. You see the location in the show notes as they pass across the screen. You can follow her for follow-up on Love.Life Telehealth. And I really want to thank the people that have joined us today. Without you, we can't do what we do. And I want to really thank you for being part of this very active and healthy community. And on behalf of the National Health Association, I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, and I look forward to seeing you and being with you on the next episode of the Health Science Podcast. Thank you so much, Dr. Graff.
Thank you so much for having me.
You've been listening to the Health Science Podcast, brought to you by the National Health Association. Thank you for joining us today and for your commitment to evidence-based health science that backs a whole food, plant-exclusive lifestyle and contributes to the well-being of all people, animals, and our environment. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino. Be sure to leave a rating and a review, and we'll see you on the next show.